Emisión.net.
Hello again and welcome to Letter from England, broadcasting for AC Press and the Spanish Evangelical Alliance. These are difficult times at the political end of Spanish evangelicalism. The Evangelical Alliance, on the one hand, and the Federation of Evangelical Organisations, the FEREDE, on the other, have been putting out statements regarding the way they operate, the role they play in Spanish evangelicalism, and particularly concerning the Federation's participation or non-participation in an ecumenical forum. The Executive Committee of the Federation, the organism which represents Spanish Protestantism officially in dealings with the government, has issued a statement claiming that the Spanish Evangelical Alliance is not as representative as it might appear to be. Now, relations between the Federation and the Alliance have often been tense in recent years, set against a backdrop of their respective roles in past and present history of Spanish evangelicalism and the interpretation of those roles. The Federation statement points out that the Alliance is made up of individual members and that this limits who it actually represents, whereas the Federation is composed of churches, denominations, and evangelical institutions, and therefore represents Spanish Protestantism en masse in dealings with the government. It has institutional relations with various national and international forums. And the underlying message of their statement is that the Federation believes the Alliance cannot speak for Spanish evangelicals in the way the Federation claims to be able to. Well, behind that, of course, is the kind of representation that the two groups have in mind. Whereas the Federation would be seen by most Spanish evangelicals as representing them at a political and an administrative and a governmental level, the aim of the Evangelical Alliance is much more theological and spiritual, trying to develop the thinking of evangelical Christians and the involvement of believers in the social and political arena, but at a personal and individual level rather than an institutional one. However, the second point the Federation statement makes is that at a Federation Committee meeting in 2007, 71% voted in favour of an evangelical charitable tax option on tax returns. This is the business whereby at the moment on any Spanish tax return there's a little box which, in fact there are two boxes which are optional for any taxpayer to tick if he wishes a certain small percentage, 0.7% of his tax, to go to either, at the moment the two options are the Catholic Church or other charities, many of which are actually Catholic themselves anyway. Well, 71% of the Federation Committee voted in favour of a new box giving that 0.7% of charity, or whatever percentage it turned out to be, to evangelical social and cultural projects or charitable projects. And only 7.5% were against at that meeting, with 20% spoiling their votes. As a result, the Federation said it drew up some guidelines in case negotiation on the issue ever came up with the government. However, they also agreed, quote, that the financial support of strictly religious activity in churches, let the reader understand worship activity, the paying of salaries of ministers and so on, evangelistic endeavours, church costs, is the responsibility of their members. A questionnaire on our website, this news agency, is asking, should non-Catholic religious groups, including evangelicals, have a charity tax option allowing them to receive public money? Well, when 2,200 people, almost that number, had voted, 47% said they are against such an idea, 28% are in favour, and a further 21% would prefer it to the continuing situation of discrimination, but are not quite so keen for anybody to have the option. Well, all this comes because the Alliance has called a new campaign by the Roman Catholic Church to increase the number of people who tick their box on tax returns perverse. A small amount of the tax, as I say, goes two charitable causes, and the Catholic campaign is entitled "Tick the Box for the Church." Well, the Alliance complains quite rightly in a statement that this motto, which is being widely used in an advertising campaign, claims publicly that there is just one church, the Catholic one. Well, of course, that always has been and remains the position of the Vatican. But clearly, as the Alliance go on to say, there are also Orthodox and Protestant churches, and that this campaign does not recognize that. The Alliance maintains that the campaign perpetuates the idea that the state should act as fundraiser for a religious group, and promotes the view that the major connection between church and state is financial, a view that Spanish Protestants reject out of hand. Protestants, they say, believe that financial matters should be covered by faith communities themselves through the giving of their members, with the exception, they add, of social or cultural services they offer, just like any other group in society. In this sense, they think there are much more important issues with regard to the relationship between the Spanish state and religious groups, and hence the controversy with the Federation of Evangelical Organisations, which seems to be campaigning, or at least ready to campaign or to support or promote the idea of an evangelical tax charity option. And finally, the Alliance adds that the campaign promotes the use of public money without any control, and also to maintain religious and worship activities, which they say is always unacceptable, never mind which group is involved. Well, if that weren't enough, the chairman of the Federation of Evangelical Organisations, Daniel Rodriguez, says the Federation will not participate in the joint prayer vigil nor in any ecumenical activity, referring to comments made that they were, or indeed are, participating in a forum called the Ecumenical Pentecost Forum. Now, Rodriguez did admit that the FEREDE, the Federation, is involved in talks with that forum. But the forum put out a statement themselves referring to an ecumenical prayer meeting which included a mention of Federation members. This led Chairman Rodriguez to tell this news agency that the FEREDE is not participating in this meeting and will only participate in dialogue with the forum, but will not join the prayer vigil nor any other ecumenical worship activity. He also denied that the Federation press officer, Jorge Fernandez, was participating in the forum and the ecumenical meeting. However, an Ecumenical Pentecost Forum blog did include his name as one of the press officers responsible for the celebration, which was held on May the 10th. Now, the Evangelical Pentecost Forum is the Spanish branch of the European Forum for Christian Dialogue, a group where Catholics, Orthodox and Protestants talk about, quote, how to advance in unity and ecumenical fraternity. Two Spanish denominations, the Anglican Church and the IEE, which is a combined Methodist Presbyterian denomination, figure in the list of participants as members of these two groups are involved in the meeting. So what is the issue which the Evangelical Alliance has with this forum and with Federation participation in it? Well, the huge problem with the forum is the question of gospel proclamation. The forum is signed up to the European Ecumenical Charter as, quote, a source of inspiration and agenda setter. My paraphrase. Now, part of this inspiration is dealing with our Christian differences with respect, freedom and responsibility, and joining in peaceful theological reflection without trying to persuade or change each other's views. And that's the part that I think is important to emphasize, without trying to persuade or change each other's views. In other words, the conversion of Catholics, for example, is out. If someone is a Catholic, be that nominal or practicing, then they are outside the box, as it were, of acceptable evangelistic endeavor. Well, the Charter avoids what it sees as competition and promotes cooperation between churches in what it calls the proclamation of the sole gospel. And a statement put out by the forum says the meeting is undergirded by the fact that we profess one baptism, one Lord, and one faith. Yet this is palpably not the case. The Charter says its aim is the visible unity of churches in Europe, but Rome's take on this means all churches bowing the knee to the Vatican. The Charter wants to avoid what it calls competition between Christian groups, but the problem is not all of them are preaching the biblical gospel. And this news agency understands from reliable sources that the Federation's Executive Committee Its maximum authority outside AGMs has not yet reached an official decision as to whether its members should participate in the forum. Well, the Federation is operating in murky ecumenical waters, and the Spanish Evangelical Alliance and this news agency are trying to maintain a clear line through this murkiness at a theological and biblical level. Spanish evangelicals at this time need to be clear that the proclamation of the Christian gospel is the most important thing. Thank you for listening to Letter from England, broadcasting at emission.net. Goodbye.
Emisión.net